not to say we aren't trying to be better, but still.
Okay, everybody, I hope you had time to have good fellowship and prayer time at your tables.
Right.
Officially, I would like to announce we are having our speaker after much anticipation. How many times have I said we're going to have Mike Cahill here as our speaker? Have you ever wondered if coaches can pray? High school, college, and NFL, we've seen it. Is it okay? Are we allowed to? When my kids were on the soccer field and we said a prayer and go team, was that allowed, or was it just because we were at a Christian school? Mike Cahill is the ministry director at, I don't want to say the correct ministry relations. And his organization, FLI, is First Liberty Institute. Along with it being very pertinent now with our freedom of speech, I think this is very poignant that we're having him speak now, and there's a lot of good information. He's going to talk for about 30 minutes, and then we are going to have a Q&A at the end, so hold your hands and tongues, and I'll announce when we're going to do the Q&A. So everybody give a warm welcome to our guest, Mike Cahill.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenny. It's an absolute privilege to be here. Thank you for having me. I grew up in Texas. I know a lot of people tell me I really don't sound like a Texan because my father was in oil and gas, so he moved around a ton when I was a kid. But if you need me to turn it on, I can turn it on whenever I need to, don't say. My 18-year-old, when he was very young, you know, I used to do the whole read to him in bed at night, and his favorite book was Good Night Moon, which I'm sure you guys have all read before to your children or grandchildren. But he would never let me use my own voice. So we'd end up reading it about 5 or 6 different ways with different accents or whatever, and he always made me finish it with Mater from Cars. So you'd always start Good Night Moon, did I moon, did I to the red balloon? And before you know it, you're in character and you're doing everything backwards. So this is my life. So yes, I work for First Liberty Institute, and First Liberty Institute, we're the largest of our kind. We are a law firm, a nonprofit law firm, and all we do and all we take on are the first 2 clauses of the First Amendment. So anything to do with those 2 first clauses, and that's it. So anything to do with Congress shall make no law in respect to the establishment of religion or prohibiting the exercise thereof, the free exercise thereof. Anything to do with those 2 phrases, and that's it. That's all we do. And I'll explain our model in a minute as well. So we started a number of years ago, and we're still going strong today, obviously. We started out just in Texas, and in 2012 we expanded nationwide. Most people have not heard about us unless they're from Texas, because our corporate offices are in Dallas. But a lot of people have heard of our cases. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about a little bit about our cases, a little bit about what we do, our model, and some of this is going to blow you away because we're getting cases now that we never thought we would get, and they're very blatant against religious freedom. So all we do is religious freedom. We don't do anything to do with the Second Amendment. We really don't touch on freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. All we do is religious freedom, and that's it. And believe me, it keeps us plenty busy, to say the least. So what I wanted to start off with is something just fun, because I like fun. So one of our cases was with Coach Joe Kennedy. A lot of our brochures are right there in the middle of the table. You're welcome to grab those, go through them. I put about 5 on each table. You can kind of pass them around. I'll get into Coach Kennedy's case in a minute, but we got that case in 2015. It took 7 years to get to the end of that case. Went up to the Supreme Court twice. And the second time it went up to the Supreme Court, it was heard in August of 22. And they ruled on it in June of 22. And we won the case 6-3. And whenever you win a Supreme Court case, you go on this amazing amount of interviews that just goes on and on and on. And Joe and Kelly Shackelford, our CEO, and sometimes it was Jeremy Dice, one of our attorneys, sometimes it was Hiram Sasser, one of our other attorneys. They went on all these interviews on radio, TV, podcasts, you name it. He did literally about 85 interviews in a week. It was just nonstop. And one morning, at about 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning Dallas time, we have a little bitty room inside of our offices that's really small, just for media. And Kelly and Joe sat in this room because CNN was going to do an interview with them. And I thought I'd play a fun little snippet of this because it's just fun. I don't even need to set it up. It sets up itself. Oh, hold on. Forgot to hit the volume.
Great day for every
Start it over.
How did it feel when you learned of this decision?
I think this is just a great day for every American. It really shows, the diversity and the inclusion of exactly what America is about.
Is it what you expected?
Okay, actually, let me set this up a little bit. So, this was kind of near the end of the week when he'd probably done 70 other interviews. And so when they get to the offices at First Liberty, Joe looks at Kelly and says, "Kelly, I'm going to have fun with this one." And Kelly said, "What are you going to do?" And Joe said, "Oh, just go with me." And Kelly said, "Oh boy, okay." Now, Joe's like any other normal American football coach, except he loves Jesus. And so just notice the language he uses with CNN. Oops. I'll get this right in a minute. Obviously, I'm not a tech guy.
How did it feel when you learned of this decision?
I think this is just a great day for every American. It really shows, the diversity and the inclusion of exactly what America is about.
Is it what you expected?
I kind of did. There's been so many people that have been positively reporting on this. You guys have supported us, and it's just been wonderful. So I was very optimistic about going into this because I think everybody has the exact same freedom. People of faith, people of no faith, of different faith.
I do want to be clear, we cover this, we don't take a position on it, just to be clear. We certainly are very interested in this case. If you were watching this, Coach, and this wasn't you, right? This wasn't your case, but it was another coach's case. And it was Muslim prayer, and they had prevailed. Would you feel the same about it being a victory?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great thing. That's why I supported and defended the Constitution and when I was a Marine for 20 years. I believe in equality for everybody. It doesn't matter if it's a person of different faith or people that have absolutely no faith.
Kelly, some critics are looking at this and they are concerned that this spells the demise or the end or certainly knocking down some separation of church and state. How do you see it? What do you say to that?
Well, of course, Brianna, number one, the word separation of church and state aren't in the Constitution, and so, it really focuses on the two religion clauses. But that concept in and of itself, I think, is a great one. It's talking about the separation of the institutions of the church and the state. We don't want the church to be the state to be the church. Of course, here, there is no institution of the church. It's the powerful state versus an individual, Joe Kennedy. And what's great about America is, even though the state is incredibly powerful, there's one thing more powerful in this country, and it's the United States Constitution.
How do you make sure that all students feel included, whether they are Christian, or they are Muslim, or they're Jewish, or they're even atheist?
Awesome question, and that's really simple. I'm going to go back to the practice that I attended, and my commitment at the very beginning to God was just to say a prayer of thanks alone.
Coach Kennedy, we know this has been a long process for you. We appreciate you sharing your story with us today. And Kelly Shackelford, thank you for being with us.
That was fun. The second that he said that, she said, "Thank you for being with us," everything went black, and Coach Kennedy fell off the chair laughing his head off. And Kelly just shook his head. It was quite hilarious, to say the least. So we're going to get into that case a little bit. That case changed the law, and I'll explain that to you. It didn't change the law, it brought it back to what the founders originally intended. And I'll explain that by talking a little bit about this case. So, this is the Bladensburg Cross case. This was the first Supreme Court victory that we had, and this was back in 2019. So the Bladensburg Cross is a World War I memorial that was erected by Gold Star moms in the 1920s. 53 names are on that cross that died for our country over in Europe in World War I. Well, these moms got together and they said, we want to put together a memorial to remember our sons. And of course, traveling over to Europe was really not an option. It's not very cheap back then. Not cheap today, but it was even more expensive back then. So they decided to erect this cross. So they erected this cross in Bladensburg, Maryland. And it was on the property that they purchased themselves, the whole bit. And it stayed. It was wonderful. People loved it. They thought it was great. Fast forward to the 1950s, Eisenhower gets into office. And if you know history, one of the things that was Eisenhower's biggest things he did was he created a lot of highways, interstates. That was one of his biggest things. And so during that time, there was a highway that was going to be built right by the cross. So Eisenhower took over that property by eminent domain. But he reached out to the owners of that and said, hey, look, the cross stays. We're not going to take it down. We know how important it is. We're going to take over the land because we want to take care of it for you. That way, you're not in danger. So, okay, great. So the cross stays there for decades. No one cares. Until about the mid-20-teens, when the American Humanist Association decided to send somebody up to the cross to be offended by it. So they go up and they look at the cross and they go, that is offensive. It's on federal land. There is no place for that in this country. So they sued to get this taken down. And when they sued to get it taken down, it finally ended up at the appellate court. We lost at the appellate court, sadly. Very important thing to recognize, which I'll explain in a second. It got to the Supreme Court, and we asked them to do two things at the Supreme Court. And I'm going to do a sidebar on that. There's a case in 1971 called Lemon v. Kurtzman. Anybody ever heard of that case? I know you have. No cheating. Anyone else heard of Lemon v. Kurtzman? Oh, okay. Lemon v. Kurtzman is one of the most, if not the most, choking religious freedom Supreme Court cases in the history of our country. It basically made it to where you could bring offense to court if you saw something that was religious, a religious symbol. It could be a public prayer. It could be anything like that. And you could bring it to court and say, this needs to stop because this is on federal land, state land. It's in a school. It's this, whatever it might be. And Lemon v. Kurtzman put together basically a 4-question test that if it passed these little questions, then that got squelched. This is why for literally over 50 years you saw nativity scenes getting taken down, crosses taken down, stars of David taken down. All of these things, as well as prayer, maybe at a school board meeting. Anything like that was stopped immediately, all because of what they call as the Lemon test. And it's literally in law books in law schools. They go over it in constitutional law. It's called the Lemon test. And they're taught this. Well, when we brought this case to the Supreme Court, we said we're asking for two things. One, obviously we want to win the case. But number two, we're going to ask the Supreme Court to look at this case without using the Lemon test. So the Supreme Court justices ruled 5-4 in our favor that they weren't going to look at this case with Lemon. They're just going to look at it purely from the first two clauses of the First Amendment. We won that case 7-2. Very overwhelming win. That meant, at that time, 2 liberal justices ruled in our favor. First big chink out of Lemon. Fast forward to Coach Kennedy, and with Coach Kennedy, when we got this case, it goes up to the Supreme Court, and all of a sudden, in the middle of the arguments, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh start to talk during the oral arguments. And when they start talking during oral arguments, the thing that was interesting is that Kavanaugh looked at Gorsuch, he said, you know, this Lemon case, it's just bad law. We really need to look at this. Now, we did not ask the Supreme Court to look at Lemon for this case because we'd had the Kennedy case since 2015. We just wanted Joe to win. He just wanted his job back. He didn't ask for money. He just wanted to coach. That's all. So when they took this on, they start talking about Lemon. All of our attorneys and Kelly and everyone is listening, their eyes just start as big as silver dollars. And then when we won the case 6-3, Gorsuch wrote the majority opinion. And one of the things he put in the majority opinion was a very, very important thing. And that was, he said, the Lemon test is dead. We will no longer use Lemon versus Kurtzman to decide any religious freedom case in this country. Period. Huge. What that means for us today is we have more religious freedom as we're sitting here today. Most people don't know this. We have more religious freedom in this country now than most of us have had in our lifetime. Because that Lemon test is gone. Even Sonia Sotomayor, who wrote the minority opinion, she even said that the Lemon test is dead. It is beyond massive, as you can only imagine. So what else do? We do all kinds of cases. We do cases with schools, obviously, with Coach Kennedy. We do cases in the military. We have an ongoing case right now with 35 Navy SEALs who refused to get the jab. It's ongoing. We have another case with the military, with the Air Force, with 9 Air Force that also refused to get the jab. We don't, by the way, we don't take a side on whether you get it or not. We don't care. That's between you and your doctor. But what we do care about is the religious freedom of being able to choose if you have a religious conscious decision of not having that. You should be able to have the freedom to get a religious exemption. So that's important to us. And that's why we're defending these Navy SEALs and the Air Force on those cases. We also do stuff that has to do with the corporate world in companies, as well as small businesses, like a lot of you. We have a case that's been going on for over 10 years. I think it's 11 years now. It's much like the case in Colorado of the baker, Jack. We have one that's with a family called the Klein, so we call it our Sweet Cakes case, because it's Sweet Cakes with Melissa Klein. And what's interesting about this case that makes it a little bit different than Jack's case out in Colorado is it was a lesbian couple that came to them and asked them to do a wedding cake. Well, the clients had a really good relationship with this couple. They sold them all kinds of baked goods. They were friends. They were friendly. And they looked at this couple and they said, look, you know, we're Christians, we're believers, we love Jesus. It's against our convictions. But here's 5 other places that will do an incredible job for you. And they said, oh, thanks, that's wonderful. So they literally picked one of the 5. They got a wedding. Everything was great. Until the Oregon Bureau of Labor got involved. They heard about it, they didn't like it, and they fined the clients $138,000 and put them out of business. We've been fighting this case for 11 years now. It's gone up to the Supreme Court 2 times. Last year it went up the 2nd time. And this time they basically kicked it back down to the lower courts and they said, we want you to rule this case. We want you to start over. You completely stunk this up again. Try again. But this time we want you to rule in view of how we ruled on this other case that was last summer. It wasn't our case, but it was called the 303 creative case, if any of you are familiar with that. It was a religious freedom case, had to do with a wedding website. It was much like the cake. So we do a lot of cases like that as well. We have also gotten involved with some very interesting cases that has to do with school.
We have to work together.
Watch this.
To do this. So I would like to ask, if you guys don't mind, I'd like to pray for Suffolk Public Schools with all of you. If you'd like to take a moment, bow your heads, please. Anybody suggest? I apologize.
We can't do that.
Why can't we? I like to pray for our students in our school.
That's not in what you signed up to do, ma'am.
Well, it's in regards to all of this. It's transparency, accountability. I'm praying that we do that.
Ma'am, no, ma'am. We ask that you get back onto your topic. No one.
That is my topic, sir.
Well, then it's not permitted at this time.
To pray for our schools is not permitted.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So now, each of you hear this. If anybody would like to pray with me after the meeting outside, I'd invite you, because I think that that's the only way that we're going to come together is through God in our faith.
I believe that man should always pray. I mean, I love prayer, but this is not the place per the law. And we're going to ask Attorney Waller if you could speak to it.
Our Father, who art in heaven,
At this time, we're going to go to recess. Ask the officers to leave. Officers, during recess, can you clear the room?
That happened up in Virginia in August. When we heard about that, we wrote a letter, and we started working with the school district's attorneys, and we kind of set them straight on what religious freedom is all about and the law. And I think they probably did a little research and realized that we'd done a case kind of like this with Coach Kennedy, and we were in there for the long run for 7 years, so we're committed. In November, 2 months ago, they let her come back and pray. This is Heather Rooks. She's in Phoenix, Arizona, a little suburb called Peoria. She's a mom. She loves the Lord. She got onto the school board last year. In this school board, you're allowed to have 3 minutes to yourself to say anything you want at the end of the school board meeting. She wanted to read some scripture with her 3 minutes. The chairman of the school board shut her down. Literally, we have it on video. I just don't have it with me today. But literally on video, we have him saying, "This is unconstitutional. You can't read from the Bible." Now, I don't know about you, but I remember presidents standing behind the presidential seal and reading the scripture. So why is it the President of the United States can read scripture behind the presidential seal, but a school board member can't read it? Kind of strange. So we have that case going, and that one is up and going. What else do? We have another case that's very active right now. This is Valerie Klosterman. Valerie is a third-generation medical practitioner. Her grandmother was a nurse, her mom was a nurse, and she's a PA, all at the same little clinic in the middle of nowhere, Michigan. Well, the University of Michigan came in and bought out this clinic, and when they did that, of course, if you've ever been involved in a company that buys out a smaller company, they go through training for all the employees to kind of show them the University of Michigan way. And most of it was basic stuff, here's the fire extinguisher, here's the bathrooms, here's this is what you do, here's our holiday schedule. Well, at one point, they got all the clinicians together and they said, and you will take a true-false test on these computers. Well, they kind of rigged it, where if you didn't answer the questions the way that they wanted you to, you couldn't move on to the next question. It froze it. So Valerie couldn't move on from the first question because it was about gender-affirming care for minors. So she, after 4 or 5 times of trying to get to it, she finally said, "Forget it, I'm just going to answer this the way I know that they want me to." So she did, and then she immediately called for a meeting with Human Resources. She goes into HR, and she says, "Look, I can't do this. This is, number one, I'm a believer of Christ. I believe God made man and woman and he didn't screw up. And number two, I took the Hippocratic Oath, which says I will not do any knowingly harm to anybody medically. And I know that this does medically harm things to children." They brought in the DEI director. He called her evil, said she had no integrity and did not belong in the medical field, and they fired her on the spot for her religious beliefs, which is, of course, against Title VII. You can't do that. So we have that case. And that's a relatively newish case. We're just about to start depositions. So pray for Valerie. By the way, I'll share this later. Her children, they have 4 kids, triplets and another one. They wrote us a letter last Christmas that said, "Thank you for defending our mom. We've asked our parents not to give us any Christmas gifts this year. And instead," I get choked up at this, "instead, we want to send you money to support people like my mom." They're like, 10. How many 10-year-olds do that? I know I'm running short on time. I'll go fast. There's another case that we have that is really, really heating up, and it's kind of it's a pretty scary case. It's with Alaskan Airlines. And we have 2 people that were defending in this case. And what happened was, Alaska Airlines started as a Christian organization. The CEO actually was a missionary. And when you used to get on Alaskan Airlines, when it first started, you would sit down and you'd get, your little drink, and you'd have napkins and everything. And everything had Bible verses on it. And they even had prayer cards you could fill out and give to the flight attendants, and they would send them to corporate, and corporate would pray over those prayer requests. That's great so far. Well, back in 99, I think it was 1999, around that time frame, he stepped down as being a CEO and stayed on the board of directors, but stepped down as CEO because he wanted to spend more time in the mission field. And then a few years later, sadly and ironically, he died in a plane crash on the mission field. When he did, he did not plan too well for him being gone, and the board got taken over by very, very far left individuals. And now they built within their organization kind of an intranet, and almost like an internal Facebook, I guess you could say, for just their employees. And when they built it out, their first post on there, you'd think it'd be something like, tell us about your best experience with a customer, or something like that. No, instead it was, we at Alaskan Airlines, we support the Equality Act, which I know some of you probably know a lot about. And unfortunately, the Equality Act is really not about equality. It's about equality for some, not equality for all. And it literally strips religious freedom from anybody of any faith. It makes the Religious Freedom Restoration Act null and void. That was passed almost unanimously by Congress and signed into law by Bill Clinton in 1992. Or 1994, excuse me. Pretty incredible. And it pretty much makes it null and void. Well, they called her, and she wrote a little, our client Marley, she wrote a little thing on there and said, what is it, does Alaskan Airlines believe it can dictate and legislate morality as a company? That's all she said. She got called into HR, asked her what she meant by that. She said, well, I'm a Christian, I'm a believer, and I don't think this is equality at all. They started to turn down her schedule. Eventually, she wasn't scheduled at all. And then eventually she got brought in and she got fired based on her religious beliefs. And the same thing happened to another gal that was just like her in a different city. So we're defending both of them. We just got done with depositions, and this case is going to be heating up. It's either going to settle, or it's going to probably end up at the Supreme Court, one of the two. So keep your eyes on that. If I had time to show you the video, I would, but I know we got to move on. Let me get to this. So I know one of the big things that's going on in our country right now is a lot of anti-Semitism, sadly. We defend a lot of Orthodox Jews. I think one of the most frightening things that's happened recently is a lot of Orthodox Jewish believers who are trying to do this from worship in their house or a building or whatever. They're coming against them. This is one of a case that we just won recently. There was a building that sat just empty in New York State, and no one bought the building. So this Shabbat of the Beaches came in and they bought the building, and they were going to do all their worship services there as Orthodox Jews. Well, the city found out that it was an Orthodox Jewish group that bought it. They didn't like that, so they decided they wanted to take it over by eminent domain. Why? Because they needed a place to run their CPR classes. Exactly. So we just were like, that's stupid. That's ridiculous. So we took this on and we won the case. We won it for them. Now, let me tell you a little bit about our model, because I know we're running out of time, but I'll be real fast and then we'll do Q&A. Our model is very different. Most nonprofits, what they do is they raise a ton of money, they hire attorneys, and they put them all over in different cities that have big airports so they can fly them all over the place. We do it a little different. We partner with law firms all across the country that are very prestigious. We have 21 attorneys on staff, and they're able to really multiply their abilities because of the fact that we also use these volunteer attorneys from these very prestigious law firms all over the country. So what does that mean? The Coach Kennedy case. The guy that did the oral arguments for us for Coach Kennedy is a guy named Paul Clement. Have you guys ever heard of Paul Clement? A few. Paul Clement was Bush's Solicitor General. Paul Clement is one of three attorneys in the history of our country, so since the 1700s, who has done 100 or more oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court. He called Kelly and said, Kelly, when this goes to the Supreme Court, I want this case. Now what's Kelly going to say? I don't know, Paul. I just don't know if you're at that level. So obviously Kelly said, well, absolutely. Now, of course, my comedic mind is thinking this poor school district attorneys walk in, they see Paul Clement, and they're like, oh man, we haven't got a chance. So sure enough, Paul did that. Now, Paul charges anywhere from $2,000 to $2,500 an hour for his services. So basically, it comes out for us that for every $100,000 we spend in legal fees and legal money that goes out for cases, we get about $600,000 back in pro bono work from our volunteer attorneys. A 6-to-1 return rate on the money that we have, which is unheard of in a nonprofit. It is unheard of. Now, we knew that this would be a great money saver. We knew that this would be a wonderful way for God's funds, but the thing that we didn't expect was the win rate. Most nonprofit law firms that do this kind of thing, they'll win anywhere from 40 to maybe 50% of their cases, because these are hard cases. These are not easy cases. We have won literally over the past 20, 25 years, 90% of our cases, year over year over year. It's really amazing. So I guess we'll open it up to some Q&A. So yeah, if you have a question, there you go. I'll show you a quick video at the end if anybody wants to stay. It's a very touching video. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to start it. My bad. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, you're fine, you're fine.
Okay. By the way, I've attended Chabad of Long Beach.
I'm sorry.
So thank you.
Obviously, I'm not Jewish.
Well, are you grafted in? So you are. Okay, back to the wedding cake.
Yes.
Did that you have another case that's ongoing,
Yes, yes.
and when would we expect?
What's the next step in it?
Yeah.
It's right now, because they live in Oregon, it got kicked down to the district court in Oregon. And right now it's just in the legal process of people filing different papers that has to do with the case to start it all over again. So it'll eventually be heard in the district court in Oregon. And it'll start all over. Depending on what happens, it'll probably end up back at the Supreme Court in about 2 years.
When people get sworn, like when people go in to testify in a court, do they still put their hand on the Bible, or do they take the Bible out and what do they put their hand on?
I would say for the most part, yes. I've seen some people that they put it on a book of their choice. You know, some people I've seen Jewish people do it on a pen, you know, on help me,
Torah.
The Torah. Thank you. I want to say Pentateuch, but that's the Greek version of the first 5 books of the Bible. So yeah, some people put it on the Torah. I've seen Muslims that get sworn in. They do it on the Quran. So yeah.
Read from Scripture, like you go in and put your hand on it.
Yeah. Thank you. Making my point for me.
You mentioned the Alaska Airlines case was scary. What makes it scarier than the other cases that you've done?
Because it pretty much does away with Title VII, which has been around since the 1960s. One of the things that Title VII does is it keeps organizations from firing you based on your race, your creed, your color, or your faith. And if they win that case, it basically gives the okay for organizations to fire you because you have whatever faith it is that you have. So if they don't like a Muslim in their company, they can fire them. If they don't like a Christian in their company, they can fire them. Since there's so much anti-Semitism in this country, if they don't like a Jewish person in this role, they can fire them. And they can get away with it. That's why it's scary.
Do you feel optimistic about that case?
We do. It's a pretty open and shut case. And not to mention, Alaskan just bought Hawaiian Airlines. And I don't think they're going to want the bad press. I don't know what they're going to do, but if I was the CEO of Alaskan Airlines and I'm about to have this case get on all kinds of networks, now the depositions are done, it'll go to court sometime this year. They're going to want to run for the hills and get this thing settled because they're not going to want the press, and Hawaiian Airlines isn't going to want the press either.
So if it settles, though, it's not going to be precedent for that, is it?
It all depends on what the settlement is. It's all about what's written in the law with it, yeah. So, potentially.
So a lot of this has come to pass because of judicial activism.
Yes.
What can we do to prevent that moving forward?
Great question. And I'll answer this quickly. The judicial activism is interesting because what happens is whoever's in power, they have the ability to put up judges for federal court, and those are lifetime appointments. One of the things that we've been very active in doing is doing backgrounds on potential nominees and appointees for judgeships. It's a whole long story, and I won't get into all of it, but we're the only organization that does that. And if you ever saw have you ever seen the movie Moneyball? You know, we basically have some software that's a lot like Moneyball, except we're not checking batting averages. We're checking their religious freedom backgrounds and what they've done as far as cases with that. And we found out we're the only organization that actually vets judges. The vast majority of judges that you see that are put up there, it's all the good old boy network. Somebody knows somebody, or somebody's sister, somebody's brother, somebody's godson, goddaughter, who knows. But it has nothing to do with how good they are.
I would like to commend you first and foremost. When he spoke about the jab as a veteran of the Navy, I could start crying right now, but I won't. So the case that they're representing, I'm a member of that team. If the Bible says, if my people which are called by my name would humble themselves and pray, and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, forgive their sins and heal their lands. I believe during the time of the, I'm going to say the pandemic real quick, many believers did not want to go and receive shots for jobs, kids going back into schools, etc. I'll stand with you at any given time. I'm a part of SEAL Team 3, so I understand the fight and struggle that the countries don't even understand. And so a lot of religious liberties were at stake during the time this pandemic happened. And some of us as parents allowed our kids to get shots to go back into schools, and some of us took shots. I didn't, to get jobs. And many of my brothers refused to for reasons medically. But nonetheless, I would think that if you accept in a collection, I'll be first to pledge $100 to the organization for what they're doing. I think if we as God's people just come together and do whatever it is that we can do, God will send a voice for us in the wilderness. We'll be able to go to Pharaoh and say, this ain't right, let my people go.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And thank you for your very brave service. Before I show this video, I do want to point out something to you. In the middle of the table is a bunch of brochures. Take home whatever you want. There is a thing in there called Restoring Faith in America. That's a website we've also set up. that really educates people on the outcome of the Coach Kennedy case and how and what freedoms we have now that we did not have before the Coach Kennedy case. Now, I'll set this up real quick. So we have a lot of cases, like I said, that end up getting on the news. They're very well known. They get on CNN, Fox News, all of them. And they get pretty well known. But we have a lot of cases that never see the light of day, but they're just as important because they affect everyday people's lives. And this is a story about Gail Blair. Gail Blair is a woman that lives in Providence, Rhode Island, and she loves God. And she felt led to share the gospel with people. And this is Gail's story. Uh-oh, it was Gail's story.
Nursing was it for me. It was my identity. I did everything. If I could help them get a job or an apartment, my husband says that I am a frustrated social worker. January 7th, 1984, I actually had been going to a Bible study on the book of John, and it opened my heart to the Word of God being the answer, the truth. It was the best day of my life. I actually was born with a genetic disorder, retinitis pigmentosa, and I still continued nursing until I couldn't anymore because of my vision loss. If somebody ever said to me, hey, you could have your eyesight, but you have to, get rid of Jesus, I'd say, no deal.
Wherever I go, I try to hand this out to people. So it's 21 chapters of the gospel.
I get around with my cane to cross the street, to go in the park. Going into a park to talk with people is a pleasure, first of all, but knowing that eternal life is real and people don't know that they're in danger. People have been saved in the park. I've had more of a reaction from the staff in the park that was not too nice, like they would interrupt me. There's plenty of people to talk to. I don't have to be going after anybody. Well, I couldn't. It would be a tripping hazard for me. I was sitting on a bench with a man that I was conversing with. The executive director comes over and he says that he was going to call the police. And that's the start of the 2-year ban, even from the library, which that was a little bit of a surprise to me, that they would ban me from both the park and the library on passing out one of the 66 books of the Bible that you have in your library that people can check out. I guess my heart is broken, that I can't do what the Lord has told me to do. So if you want to say that I think about daily the lost souls. I think the Lord has positioned me right across from the park. It's a divine assignment that I absolutely need to fulfill. It's just a must.
Now here's the God part of this. We won that case later that year. The judge looked at Gail in the courtroom and said, Gail, not only are you going to win this today, but when you leave here, you're welcome to go back straight to the park. And she did. Now here's the cherry on top. The following summer, she was in the park and she was talking with somebody about the Lord. And one of the park employees who was involved in getting her barred from the park for 2 years waited for her to finish, went up to her and said, Miss Blair, can I talk to you a minute? She said, sure. So he sat down. He said, would it be okay if I went to church with you and your husband this Sunday? He still goes to church with them every Sunday. I'll be here if you have any questions, for sure. I love talking to folks and answering questions. There's so much more I didn't get to, I know, just for time, but feel free to hang out and ask me whatever you got.
Thank you, Mike. God bless you. Amazing work, important work. Thank you.
Can we donate online?
Yes, you can. So you can do, we're at firstliberty.org. Thank you. We're at firstliberty.org. And first is spelled out. It's not one ST. It's FIRST. So firstliberty.org. And also inside the big one is a card, and very, very important. So it's inside here. It looks like this. If you want to get involved, there's ways to get involved. We love prayer warriors. We send out an email once a week for those that want to be on our prayer warriors, and you'll get information on cases to pray for, clients, and it's specifics too. It's not just hey, pray for this case this week. It's hey, we're doing depositions this week in this case. Please pray for Marley. You know, it's specific stuff like that to pray for. So you can do that, and there's other ways to get involved. You can read it. I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence. So there's that. And if you have any questions about that, let me know. And take whatever you want. I've got more stuff in Dallas that I can get. So thank you again for coming. Appreciate it.